Now, I don't make promises often, but I'll make one for you right now. I promise that there will be less fights and no ejections in this show as compared to Spurs Thunder. Hey, we're back. And by the way, Devin Booker's not going anywhere. We're talking about it all on the PHNX Suns pregame show, brought to you by Gila River Resorts and Casinos. You do you at Gila River Resorts and Casinos. Visit playatgila.com for more details. I'm Eric. That's Steven, but you already knew that. Noah behind the Mac, making all the magic happen. Gerald at PHX Arena, but all of you, the most important ones in the chat. Jonathan, Braden, Melissa, Cara, Los, Optical Illusion, Ashley, Rob, Raw, everybody who's in the chat hanging out with us. Let's just kick things off with a super chat from Arton Booker Edits, who says, yo, who's ready for Bud to sabotage? Are you ready?
I mean, we'll see. We got to be expecting anything from this team. They haven't shown us to expect anything less, so.
Well, before we get into tonight's game, which is a pretty dang big game, if you look at the standings with the Timberwolves sitting 3.5 games ahead of the Suns in the 9th seed in the Western Conference, Suns outside of the play-in, one of your rare opportunities to double whammy, pick up a full game if you're able to beat Minnesota tonight. But overall, obviously, there have been trade rumors and everything floating around with the Suns. We're going to discuss Shams talking about KD, but the question was floated per usual. Oh, what about Devin Booker? Well, our own Gerald Bourguet reported earlier today, just about an hour ago, that according to multiple sources within the Suns organization, they will never trade Devin Booker. And that is the exact verbiage that Gerald quoted. Steven, when I say the Suns will never trade Devin Booker, what is your reaction?
I mean, has he ever given us an indication that anything else will happen? Like, genuinely speaking.
I think people outside of Phoenix don't understand the relationship between Booker and the franchise, let alone throw the fans in there as well. So I think for people who are aware of the situation, yes. But in the NBA, where you just saw Luka get traded, we've seen AD get traded, we've seen Braun move teams, we've seen KD get traded. Right, we've seen top-end talent, De'Aaron Fox. Like, all these guys are moving teams. So if you had to put money on it, if you draft a star, how many teams are they going to play for? The line's probably going to be set at over 1. But with Devin Booker, it feels a little different. So I think it's important to continue to push this messaging out there as we have been, that he's not going anywhere.
I mean, I understand the media side, considering I'm heavily involved in it. But again, I just don't. Like, it's never felt like he was ever going anywhere.
He's never been that guy.
And I know the discourse has been taking place the last couple of weeks, but at the same time, I don't feel like there's any other player that's more synonymous with the franchise that they're playing with right now. I brought that up before the trade deadline.
Yeah.
Like, we were just throwing out ideas and thoughts about what might potentially happen after this season. That was never even, like, close to being something I considered to be on the table, just because he's never given any indication. The franchise has never given any indication, and it just doesn't make sense on top of all of that.
Hello in the chat says, like the Suns, Book isn't going anywhere. We appreciate you being here. Hello, I like what the Damari said. Said Book will lock in like crazy 1 year soon like Dirk and go on a generational run to the finals and ultimately all the way to the chip. I think Dirk, obviously player-wise, wildly different games, but as far as the career path, Dirk, Booker, kind of on similar trajectories.
In what
Ish.
sense, though?
In the sense that you start with one team, you go through some dog days, you have some high highs, embarrassing flame out in the playoffs, all these conversations of, are you good enough to get it done? Dirk isn't a number, like, oh, he's really good, but can you win a championship with Dirk Nowitzki? Or is he going to be a number 1 seed that loses to the We Believe Warriors, right? And if Book continues throughout his career, stays with one team, and then in his later years, basically pushes this team to a championship, then it's the trajectory of you stuck with one team, you went through the thick, you went through the thin, you got through the highs and the lows, and you eventually got over the hump without going and jumping somewhere else. Not as like all-time greats as the same player, not statistically, not positionally, but franchise-wise.
Man, I can see that a little bit. I still think his situation is unique from anyone else's because of the depths of losing that he had to go through in a sustained manner, and past the losing on court, the dysfunction in the front office across multiple seasons.
And he just stuck around.
And that's why I just can't compare his situation to at least anyone that comes to mind off the top of my head that stuck loyal to a singular franchise for this long into their career. So, I mean, I hear it, I understand it, but it just didn't connect for me personally. Just because
I hear you.
Yeah.
I mean, again, Booker has a very, very unique story, and we're going to continue to talk about that. We'll talk about Shams reporting and everything. We'll do a lot of that in post game. Just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. We have a question in the chat asking about the starting lineup. Well, let's take a look at the injury report before we say the starting lineup, because there's some hints in there. So let's go ahead and look at that. Bradley Beal is back. Grayson Allen is back. And Monte Morris is back. Cody Martin, Jalen Bridges out. As far as Minnesota goes, Anthony Edwards in. That's big. Julius Randle in. That's big. Rudy Gobert out. I got a question for you about that later. Bones Highland also out. But as far as that starting 5 tonight, Steven, it is Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Nick Richards, and Bol Bol. How do you feel about that starting lineup?
As expected, rolling with the best 5 players. It's a breath of fresh air to see him doing that. And I think it should have a different flavor in terms of the impact it has on this game in particular, even with Rudy Gobert being out of the rotation.
Why do you think it has a different flavor this game as opposed to maybe other games that they could play with the starting lineup?
The length, the size, the creation, not just from Bol, but also from Beal. Last time they played, Beal was coming off the bench. I think having those players in the starting lineup to play off of the advantages that Devin Booker has been creating and executing off of, but also from Kevin Durant, it gives them a different feel. And I think the length, if they play to it the right way, depending on what the Timberwolves starting lineup is, should bode well for them in terms of trying to shrink the floor on Julius Randle in particular.
Yeah, I think that Bol Bol will have a lot of fun. Because he mentioned after his game where he scored 25 that his teammates make it easier. Well, love or hate Bradley Beal, I think my frustration falls from the availability factor. He is available tonight. When he is available, and since he's been back in the starting lineup, Steven, Beal has been incredibly consistent. Some of his best scoring consistently since he put on a Suns uniform. But I mentioned I had a question for you about Gobert. I understand that the NBA world, quite frankly, just fucking hates Rudy Gobert. Just hates him, right? And to be honest, like, I'm not a fan. But on the basketball court, he brings undeniable skills defensively. How different is it to play this Minnesota defense without a Rudy Gobert, even though they still have some strengths?
They don't have the same length, for one. And then in addition to the length, past the physical stature of Rudy Gobert, he is quite literally a defensive anchor. You can run multiple schemes. The past couple of years, Chris Finch has gotten more defensive versatility out of him to where he's not just sitting in the paint. He's getting out, giving flat hedges or laterals to flatten guys out and keep them from turning the corner. And then he's able to get back into his drop from there. They don't have that dynamic to their defense. And because of that, they're bottom 10 in points in the paint conceded to opponents over the last 2.5 to 3 weeks since he's been out with the back injury. So they haven't guarded the ball well. And they also haven't had the makeup ability on the back end that someone like Rudy Gobert gives you, whether he's literally blocking shots or just the presence of him deterring in a mental processing dynamic of opponents to even look at the basket at times. So
No, sorry, go ahead.
It's very different. It's different.
I'm not comparing these two players, but obviously they're missing Gobert. Julius Randle back for the Timberwolves tonight. The focus with him is usually more offensively than defensively, but this is a player that has given the Suns troubles before. Who do you think guards Julius Randle?
It has to be Kevin Durant with this starting lineup.
Do you think Bol gets any run on him? I know the size is a width difference.
I would not advise, because anytime Julius Randle senses that he can bully somebody, his shoulder is going into someone's chest probably 2 times, and they're either going to end up in the basket, under the basket, or both. And respect to Bol, he just doesn't have the stature to withstand to take those punches from Julius Randle. Durant has it more than Bol, but they're built similarly. So that's why I said when speaking to Bol in the starting lineup for this matchup with them, shrinking the floor is important. If you can just deter him and send him away from certain pockets of the floor based off of presentation defensively, and presentation meaning being early in your help, that's probably your best bet, because you don't have anybody that can just wall up and stop him one-on-one if he decides to go to the basket like that.
Absolutely. Here's the starting 5 for Minnesota tonight with Julius Randle returning. Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Julius Randle, Naz Reid. We've talked to Julius. We've talked to no Gobert. We all know what Anthony Edwards can bring. When him and Devin Booker square off, it's tough. But as far as Suns defense goes, out of Conley, McDaniels, and Reid, feels like an obvious answer to me. Who are you keeping your eye on as somebody who could present a problem for Phoenix?
So naturally is Naz Reid, because
got to say the name twice. Naz Reid.
When you don't have Rudy Gobert in the starting lineup, that shifts the way your defense is set up to try to defend Julius Randle. Obviously, he works in similar areas of the floor that Kevin Durant does. Usually your center is somewhere around the paint if Rudy Gobert is on the court. With Naz Reid, they're 2 to 3 steps away from the paint. So how do the Suns rotate in terms of help? Are they sending double teams? Are they active with their rotations, or are they just blasé? And are they active in terms of getting deflections and deterring players away from pockets of the court? There's like a lot of the little things I'm going to be looking for in this game, especially early on.
I mean, it's like polar opposites as far as the center position goes offensively from Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid. Naz Reid's dribbling between the legs. Has he pull up 3, rainbow shot, swish. Like, it's crazy. Some of the stuff that he could do as a near 7-footer.
And I said the other thing to that point, I'm glad you brought it up. 4-5 pick and roll killed the Suns in the fourth quarter. In their last matchup with the Timberwolves, Julius Randle, I think he scored like 8 points, and he was accountable for like 14 in the fourth quarter. A majority of that came off a pick and roll with Rudy Gobert. Get the switch with Mason Plumlee, get the switch with Nick Richards, and then punish them. How do the Suns combat that? Are they switching it actively today? Are they showing that help that I'm speaking to? Remains to be seen, but those are some of the things I'll be looking for early on.
I think it's going to be interesting to see that, especially because I love Bol Bol. Been loving the Bol Bol experience. I do enjoy watching Nick Richards play. Obviously, the highlights aren't as flashy. He's had some lows, but defensively as a 4-5, Bol and Richards, not the most stout defensive presence inside. I'm going to look at Kevin Durant for a lot of help defense, because those are 2 long players who can make it difficult, but I don't know if they're going to be good enough to get full-on stops, contest threes hard. Those are just one of my keys. Let's take a look at your keys for tonight's game.
Yeah. We're going to start first with looking at the offensive side of the floor, and that's them getting up the requisite number of 3-point attempts that they need. That's typically an indicator of their process. They get up to 40 or 42 threes in this one. I think they're operating in a good space in terms of the ball movement. Board presence. This Minnesota Timberwolves team without Rudy Gobert, we talked about their defense, but their rebounding has also taken a hit, conceding more second chance points. Can Nick Richards have one of those BNE type of games that we've been speaking to, which is a space that he's been operating in the last 2 to 3 games? They need that, and they also need everybody else to be crashing with them. And then the last thing, taking care of the basketball. We talked about Julius Randle dictating in the fourth quarter, and that whole fourth quarter being played on his terms in their last matchup. If the Suns don't turn the ball over to the extent that they did in that fourth quarter, they might be talking about a win that would have potentially changed the trajectory of the last 7 to 8 games that have come since then. So, and then the last big thing for me in this matchup, can they just start switching a little bit more? Like, please. I'm almost
look at the
begging
camera
for
and
it.
ask.
I'm almost begging for it. I'm looking at the camera doing it all season
You're
long.
such a sicko, dude. I love it.
It's a matchup. It's just something that they need, because they get caught in limbo when they have to make certain rotations. And what switching does is mitigate the volume of rotations that you have to make. That's a coaching thing. And yes, I know I'm as aware of as anybody that's been watching Suns basketball this season. But
It's a
For the
coaching
love of
and
God,
communication
for the
thing.
love of God, just try something different. If what you're trying is not working, are you gonna be stubborn? Or are you gonna experiment with something different?
Yeah, probably be stubborn. We'll see what the rotations look like tonight. Obviously, Ryan Dunn getting some burn. Maybe see a little more Colin Gillespie, even though Bradley Beal and Grayson Allen's back. I don't know if he earned a spot. I think that's going to be interesting. We have some good keys in the chat. Milov says, my key is to not blow it in the third. Seen that too much. Wow Factor says, bench needs to step up while starters are resting. Now, on to one of your keys. I looked. Minnesota, as far as three-point attempts, I know you mentioned the Suns need to get theirs up. Minnesota's going to get theirs up. As far as three-pointers attempted, they're 6th in the NBA. Three-pointers made, they're top 5 in the NBA in three-pointers made, making 14.8 per game. Huge part of that is Anthony Edwards. His game has evolved a lot this season, especially shooting from deep.
Yeah, he's leading the league in three-point attempts.
That's so
and
crazy.
He's high up there in terms of percentage on top of that, and makes as well. So he's not just jacking them up on volume, he's knocking them down with some efficiency. But the other big thing, naturally, like we spoke to it, Naz Reid in place of Rudy Gobert, he's playing more minutes. More three-point attempts are being put up as well. So the Suns have to be sharp with their rotations tonight and try to stay out of help as much as they possibly can.
Not to step in your lane and keep on giving more keys, but another thing that I'm looking at for this team specifically tonight, when it comes to Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, your starting backcourt, you need to attack Mike Conley. You need to try to find a way to get him on a switch, because here's the thing, right? You're starting Bol Bol, Nick Richards, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. There's nowhere for Mike Conley to hide. If Tyus Jones was playing, there would be somewhere for Mike Conley to hide. Obviously, Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards will be the ones. Well, actually, I don't know. I don't know what the matchups are going to be, because you would maybe try to put Jaden on KD. So then that means that Mike Conley has to guard one of Beal.
He's guarding
or Booker.
Mike Conley's probably guarding Bol, honestly.
If Mike Conley's guarding Bol, and Bol just scored 25, has scored 23 recently, has been great in that starting lineup, can you not just attack that relentlessly? Somebody else pointed it out in the chat.
My rebuttal to that is, if you're Chris Finch and you put Mike Conley on Bol Bol, and Bol Bol is the player that's going at Mike Conley, and the Suns aren't running their offense and they're losing rhythm, is that a positive for you in the long run?
Probably in a vacuum, but
for that to have the impact that you're speaking to, Bol would need to score like 35 to 40.
Yeah, I mean, 35 to 40 is going to be maybe not as far as like you build your offense around it, but as far as, hey, we need an easy bucket right now. Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels are fantastic perimeter defenders.
Yeah. And last game, Anthony Edwards started on Devin Booker, and Jaden McDaniels started on KD.
And so then it's Mike Conley on Bradley Beal or on Bol Bol, and Naz Reid's going to float out there as well. There's going to be when Mike Conley's on the court. I love Mike Conley. Great career. He's had a little bit of a downturn this season. The athleticism is catching up to him.
I'm surprised he's starting in this game, honestly, because they've been starting Jalen Clark the last handful of games.
And this is a big lineup the Suns are putting out. So maybe Conley has a quick pull from Finch, who is always good coaching. Ironically enough, playing the team that he was coaching when he messed his knee up. Do you remember that? That's kind of full circle. Key for him tonight. Stay away from the sideline.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's take a look at our score predictions for tonight's game. Who do we have winning? Espo. I think this is a troll, to be honest with you. I don't really know. He says Suns by 1. The rest of us, including Gerald, are going Timberwolves. I'm going Timberwolves by 7. You're going by 6. We're on a similar page tonight.
Yeah, I think the Suns. I think this game will be a shootout. Minnesota's been a bottom third team in the league defensively since Rudy Gobert went down, but they've been scoring close to 120 points, and we know what the Suns have been doing and what they haven't been doing. So I think we got a Wild Wild West shootout here, and I think it's going to be a game where both teams score north of 120 points, and I do think Minnesota is able to get enough stops, more stops than the Suns can, and ultimately win yet another game in the PHX arena.
Here's the thing. Suns just beat the Pelicans without CJ McCollum and Zion Williamson, but they beat the brakes off of them, right? That game doesn't matter. Doesn't matter anymore. Stacking wins is important, and I get it. But the Suns are 3.5 games behind the Timberwolves. If you win, you're still 2.5 games behind the Timberwolves, who would drop to that sole possession of 10th seed in the Western Conference. Just because this is an important game, not just for the Suns, but for the Timberwolves. If they win tonight, then they go up to the 7th seed, tied with Golden State, and that's only a half a game out from the actual playoffs, right? So a win for Minnesota tonight would be massive, considering that they have been struggling and also one of the bigger disappointments in the NBA. And both of these teams need to get back on track. I hate that I feel this way, but I have so much more faith in the Timberwolves bringing themselves together, like Sparrow says, communicating in a game like tonight and executing and taking down a team like the Suns when the moment is big, just like they did in the playoffs last year.
And that's why I picked them by 6 or 7, whichever number I chose. And that's also why I said how they go about doing it, even though their defense hasn't been where it was earlier this season, is more likely to happen than the Suns getting enough stops against them.
Humble
they just
Rumble.
have guys that guard.
Yeah. Humble Rumble asks, can the Suns make the play-in?
I don't think it's impossible still.
Got 2 months of basketball left.
Again, with every matchup is them against themselves. I think you said that perfectly months ago. And I don't feel like I've identified more with anything that you said about the Suns this season than that in particular, because it rings true game after game after game. Everything we're talking about are things, for the most part, that are in their control in some capacity.
Yeah, I would say this is about as must-win as a must-win can get. I'm more comfortable putting those labels right now because not only do you have to look ahead in the fact that you're 3.5 games behind the Timberwolves, also the Mavericks, also the Kings. It's a 3-way tie at 8, 9, and 10.
And all of those teams are laying ahead of you within the next 2.5 to 3 weeks too.
Yeah, and that's going to be really important when it comes to tiebreakers, which it might if the Suns can string together some good basketball and one of these teams has a slight slide. I mean, you're looking at Dallas with all the injuries going on over there and that internal conflict that it feels like is maybe starting to brew with Klay Thompson, whose role is shifting and changing without Luka. You know, there's an opportunity there, but you also have to look backwards. I know we don't want to talk about it. The Portland Trailblazers, 27-34. The Suns are 28-32. Portland a game and a half back from
Suns
Phoenix.
better thank Cleveland for getting the job done in overtime earlier today, because Portland gave them a run for their money and then some.
They've been playing really good.
They have been. They've been playing very inspired basketball, and one thing they do, they have a few players that guard. They guard the basketball well, and then they have a game buster in Denny Avdia. So,
and the Suns have already played all of their games against the Timberwolves, right? And so the Timberwolves have the season series because they lost back-to-back games against Portland. So you got a fire underneath you. You have no reason to go down, and you have every reason to go up. And that's exactly why I think they lose tonight.
I mean, I can't go against that because of everything that we've seen that's preceded tonight's game. So stay tuned is the best thing I can say. We'll see.
Wow Factor with a great point says, get them likes up. We don't set like goals in pregame, but there's a lot of you in here right now. Would love if you guys could hit that like button, show the show some support. Milov says, story of the Suns this year, though. Play some defense like you did at the start of the season. Play defense like Ryan Dunn. I do remember talking to you back when they played Minnesota most recently and talked about Ryan Dunn being thrown in there, possibly to get thrown on Julius Randle or really anybody else. Do you see Ryan Dunn having a significant role in theory tonight? I know we can't predict Bud's usage of him, but from a skill set perspective?
Skill set suggests that he should be starting, but coach over pick your person. Pick your person. This matchup.
If you did have to pick the person, who would you pick?
I'm gonna choose Beal in this matchup in particular.
I don't disagree with you.
At the same time, I'm not the coach.
Wish you were. Genuinely, I wish that you were the coach.
I appreciate it.
I'm not just saying that because like you're my friend and we host a show together. Like if somebody came to me and said, Eric, you can push the button and Steven and Mike Budenholzer switch places, I'm taking the hit on that one, okay? I'm letting PHNX Suns take the hit because I need you over there.
Well, is Bud hopping on the podcast then?
Yes, you guys had to switch spots.
Well, yeah.
But I'll crack Bud's shell. I'll get him to talk. I'll get him to talk.
All right. I appreciate the confidence.
Maria with a $1.99 super chat. Sorry for not getting to this earlier, Maria, but we do really appreciate you. You've been very consistent with super chats. So much we appreciate that. Says, I don't want Katie to leave. Neither do I, Maria. But
rarely do I fan out, but I would rather Kevin Durant not leave as well.
Agreed.
I feel like there's a lot left to be desired from how they've built around him and Devin Booker, and I would just hate for them to have not seen that through to the utmost of their abilities.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree with you. I think the fact that we're in a position where you basically have to trade Kevin Durant unless this season miraculously does get saved and there's a rekindling of the relationship between the front office and between KD, it's still possible, but I don't want him gone. And I know some people disagree, but my favorite basketball team has Kevin Durant on it. And
yeah, if you're watching it from a non-narrative driven perspective, there is no way that you would be actively asking out loud for Kevin Durant to not be a part of the franchise that you support.
Never.
That, how many people would beg for an all-time great player, the likes of Kevin Durant,
literally
to come
me. Before we got Chris Paul, I was begging for that.
My point is, that's my point. We're not that far removed from that being the space that Suns fans were operating in. So then you get
want
that
us to go back.
Make it make sense, bro.
Oh, this might be a little more post-game venting conversations, considering we do have comments from Shams about KD and the Suns working together to find his way to a contender. Gerald's reporting on Devin Booker. We're going to get all of that in post-game. Appreciate all of you who are still here right now. We're wrapping things up on our post-game show. Noah's freaking out because he thinks I'm done with the show. I'm not done with the show, Noah, okay? I'm not going to leave half of the graphics that you made off. But it is time to get a look at the line, courtesy of our friends over at Bet365. Line tonight, basically a pick'em. Suns +1 on the spread, +100 on the money line. Timberwolves -120 on the money line, -1 on the spread. For a home game, basically a pick'em. It was funny. I was playing pickup basketball earlier, and after we were all done playing, people were looking at these lines, and they were, everybody out loud literally went, "Why the hell are the Suns favored tonight?" It's just the fact that they're healthy, and it's a home game. And Minnesota's not been that great either.
They haven't been, but they have the Suns' number.
They do.
And they have had it as well as any other team in the league the last, calendar year, basically?
Kind of, because the Suns had their number in the regular season.
Up until April.
Whooped their ass.
Up until mid-April.
Up until the playoffs. And then Minnesota decided to turn it on. Speaking of turning it on, your boy turned it on in Bet's last game. I'm in the positive. Do we have the standings? Please tell me we have the standings somewhere, because this is just beautiful. I'm going to bring this up more often, because I am positive 279 on our betting competition over at Bet365. Steven, you are in a strong second place, -135.08. Espo, all the way down there, -308.47. Steven, how are you catching up to me tonight?
Well, Noah, if we can go ahead and get my bet up on the screen.
Of course you don't know it off the top of the head. There's
I
16
did
million
it at
on there.
6:30 in the morning, so of course.
No, it's because there's 15 legs on your parlay.
Well, we starting with Minnesota winning this game. And I also have both teams scoring north of 120 points in this one for the reasons that I spoke to open the podcast. I have Devin Booker over 37.5 points, rebounds, and assists. I think there are a lot of assists on the table for him. I just did a film breakdown of his assists over the last handful of weeks on my personal YouTube channel, so you can check that out there. It's too long to watch pregame, but you can watch it at some point between the end of tonight's game and the next game. Devin Booker for that. Kevin Durant over 25 points. If the Suns are scoring north of 120, he's going to have a hefty volume of that scoring under his belt. Anthony Edwards, 32.5 points and assists combined. And the last thing, we already spoke to Naz Reid. And the Suns need to make rotations. I have him knocking down at least 3 threes in this game.
Like all of your bets. Looks good to me, man. Don't know what goes wrong, but looks good to me. Let's take a look at Espo's bet. Sure doesn't look that great. He's trying to copy my style. Taking a career high for Bol Bol, 30 points tonight. Kevin Durant over 25.5 points, plus 3,000. You did mention if Bol needs to have one of those nights where the offense runs through him, if Mike Conley's guarding him, he's going to need to drop 30. Well, he might just do that according to Espo's bet. Let's take a look at the winning member of this crew's bet for tonight. Simple little 3-leg parlay. Don't want to take big swings when you're up this much. Bol Bol over 21.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Kevin Durant over 1.5 stocks. Mentioned him as a help sign defender, re-sign defender, whatever it is. Just being there to help with Nick Richards and Bol Bol have the length but not the size to stop somebody from getting a shot up. And then I have Julius Randle over 10.5 rebounds and assists. I think he goes bully ball. And that worked with Kelly Olynyk. It better work with Julius Randle. Those were our pregame picks presented by Bet365. Download the Bet365 app. Use code PHNX365 when you sign up and find out why. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 plus and physically located in AZ. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. Text NEXT STEP to 53342 or visit retuning.az.gov. Before we give our final thoughts on this game, I want to remind everybody that NASCAR returns to Phoenix Raceway March 7th through the 9th. Join the stars of NASCAR as they battle it out for the Shiner Children's 500 at Phoenix Raceway. Nothing like witnessing the stars of NASCAR battle out 200 miles per hour on a 1-mile oval raceway. 40 drivers will compete, but only one will leave champion. But if you're there, you're already a champion. March 7th through the 9th. Get your tickets now at phoenixraceway.com. Steven, I know you gave your keys to the game. We've broken down a lot. Probably one of our better pregame shows as far as breaking down basketball goes. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you want everybody to keep their eyes on tonight?
Anthony Edwards, what are the Suns going to do with him? Because
scream and cry.
I mean, that might be most effective because the double teams that they tried to send last game were not effective as they desired for them to be. So what are they going to try to take away from him off the table, and how early do they go about trying to do that? Or are they going to stick to just one-on-one coverage? That'll probably be the other thing that I haven't already spoken to that I would look out for in this one.
I am looking for the continuation of Bol Bol, who has been in an absolute hot streak. Listen, up and down ride with Bol Bol this year, stuck to the bench, getting very spot minutes, getting nothing at all. He's taken full advantage of his opportunity. But the biggest step in Bol's career to be able to be talking about him like this consistently is consistency. So I need to see him continue to step up against a team that is a good defensive coach, but not the best defensive personnel. Right now, need Devin Booker to win that matchup against Anthony Edwards, and I just need good communication and three-point defense tonight. That's a lot to ask, but can I get it? We'll find out on our post-game show. Follow along with us during the show at PHNX_Suns. We appreciate all of you being here now and being back for our post-game show.
We all silly like the mayor.